They say the kitchen is the heart of the home. It's a place of warmth. It's where the smell of brewing coffee wakes you up on a rainy Tuesday, where you lean against the counter and talk about your big dreams while doing the dishes, and where you plan the next 10 years of your life over a shared bowl of pasta. For 7 years, my kitchen was my sanctuary. It was the one place in the world where I felt safe, loved, and completely at peace. But 3 weeks ago, that sanctuary changed. The warmth vanished, the laughter stopped, and that beautiful, sunlit kitchen became a crime scene of the heart. My name is Sarah. If you had seen me and my husband, Mark, at the local grocery store or walking through the park, you would have labeled us as the lucky ones. We were that couple. You know the type, the ones who still held hands after nearly a decade. We had the beautiful house with the floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the morning light. We had the successful careers that kept us comfortable, and a marriage that our friends used as a blueprint for their own relationships. Mark was a charmer. He was a high-level corporate consultant with a smile so bright it could sell ice to an Eskimo. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he spoke to you. And I was a freelance architectural designer. I spent my days in my home office dreaming up structures and stable foundations for other people's houses. Ironic, isn't it? I was an expert at building solid foundations for everyone else, while my own was turning into quicksand. Lately, the silence in our home didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavy. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest every time I walked through the front door. It started with the small things. You know that feeling, right? That tiny, cold stone that sits in the pit of your stomach. It's your intuition whispering to you that something is wrong, even when your brain is screaming at you to ignore it. Mark started coming home later and later. At first, it was 30 minutes, then an hour. Then he'd roll in past 9 o'clock looking exhausted. He'd walk over and kiss my forehead, but it was a hollow gesture. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. They'd be focused on the wall behind me, or the door, or his briefcase, anywhere but my face. And then there was the phone. It used to sit openly on the kitchen counter while we cooked. We didn't have secrets. But suddenly, that phone was a fortress. It was constantly face down. If a notification chimed, he'd practically lunge for it, his body tensing up like a soldier in a war zone. One Tuesday evening, I was stirring a pot of pasta. The steam was rising, filling the room with the scent of garlic and basil, but the air between us was freezing. "Is everything okay at work, Mark?" I asked. I tried to keep my voice light, like I was just making conversation. "Just a big merger, Sarah. It's draining me," he said. He didn't even look up from his tablet. He was sitting right there, 5 feet away from me, but he might as well have been on the other side of the moon. "You've been doing mergers for 10 years, Mark," I replied softly. I stopped stirring and turned to look at him. "You've never been this distant. Talk to me." He finally looked at me, and for a split second I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even sadness. It was pure, raw irritation, like I was a fly he wanted to swat away. "I'm doing this for us, Sarah, for our future. Can you just let me breathe for 5 minutes without interrogating me?" I didn't say another word. I just turned back to the pasta and watched the steam rise. That night, as I lay in bed, the silence was louder than ever. I listened to his rhythmic breathing. He was sleeping perfectly fine, while my heart was racing at 100 miles an hour. I knew, in my gut, I knew my life was fracturing. The next day, I called my best friend, Chloe. I needed someone to tell me I was crazy. "Sarah, honey, you are totally overthinking it," Chloe said over the phone. I could hear her sipping a latte, her voice sounding so calm and reassuring. "He's a man in his late 30s with a high-stress job. It's a classic midlife crisis. He's probably just bored. Buy him a gym membership, take a weekend trip, and move on. Trust me."
But Chloe didn't live in this house. She didn't hear the way the air shifted when Mark walked into a room, how the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. She didn't notice the faint, lingering scent of perfume on his suit jackets when I hung them up. It wasn't my perfume. My scent is vanilla and wood. This was floral, expensive, and aggressive. It smelled like a secret. I wanted to trust him. God, I wanted to believe he was just tired. But trust is like a glass vase. It's beautiful and clear, but once you see that first tiny, jagged crack, you can't stop looking at it. You just wait for the whole thing to shatter. Mark and Chloe thought it was I who was going to get hurt when that vase broke. They had no idea that I was the one who was about to grab the hammer.
The breaking point didn't happen with a giant explosion. It didn't happen with a screaming match. It happened on a cold, quiet Friday night. Mark called me around 6, his voice sounding that specific kind of corporate busy that I had started to loathe. He told me he had an emergency strategy session, a late-night meeting that would probably keep him at the office until well after midnight. Maybe it was a moment of weakness, or maybe I was just desperate to fix what was breaking, but I decided to be the supportive wife. I went to his favorite Thai place, bought the spicy noodles he loved, and drove down to his office to surprise him. I wanted to show him I was still in his corner. I wanted to see that smile again. But when I pulled into the parking lot, the surprise was on me. The lot was a graveyard of empty spaces. I looked up at the 14th floor where his office was located. It was pitch black. Not a single light was on. No strategy session, no emergency, no Mark. I sat there in the dark, the steam from the takeout bag fogging up my windshield. I called him. My heart was thumping so loud I could hear it in my ears. Ring, ring, ring. It went straight to voicemail. I sat in that car for a full hour. The smell of coconut curry and lemongrass filled the cabin, and it made me want to gag. I felt like the world's biggest fool. I was sitting in a dark parking lot with a bag of cold food while my husband was where? With who? I finally turned the key and drove home, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. But when I turned onto our street, my heart nearly stopped. Mark's car was sitting right there in the driveway. He had beaten me back. I walked inside, my pulse hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Mark?" I called out. My voice sounded thin, strange. He was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, pouring himself a glass of red wine. He looked perfectly relaxed, not a hair out of place. "Hey, babe," he said, flashing that salesman smile. "The meeting got canceled at the last second. I tried calling you to tell you I was coming home, but I guess your phone was acting up again. You really need to get that checked out." I looked at my phone. I had 5 bars. I had no missed calls. I looked at the man I had built my entire life with, the man I had shared a bed with for 7 years, and I realized I was looking at a complete stranger. He wasn't just lying, he was doing it with ease. He was looking me in the eye and trying to make me feel like I was the one failing. "Right," I said. My voice trembled just a little. "I must have missed it." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay there in the dark, listening to him sleep, and the betrayal felt like a physical burn. Between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., while the world was silent, I sat in the glow of my laptop. I wasn't looking for divorce lawyers yet. I wasn't ready to call a moving van. I needed the one thing he had been stealing from me, the truth. I needed to know if I was losing my mind or if my entire life had become a lie. That's when I found it. A smart power strip. It looked exactly like the one we had tucked behind the toaster in our kitchen. It had 3 outlets, 2 USB ports, and a tiny, high-definition, voice-activated microphone hidden inside. It connected to an app on my phone and uploaded every whisper to a cloud server in real time. I ordered it with overnight shipping to a locker at the grocery store. Mark didn't suspect a thing. The next afternoon, he told me he was going for a run. As soon as his car pulled out, I went to work. My heart was racing as I pulled the toaster aside and swapped the old power strip for the new one. It was such a tiny, insignificant change, just a piece of plastic.
A few minutes later, Mark came back, dripping with sweat. He walked into the kitchen to grab a bottle of water. He paused, seeing me standing by the counter. "Why are you staring at the toaster, Sarah?" he asked, wiping his forehead with a towel. "Just thinking about upgrading," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "This one is getting old." "Everything gets old eventually," he muttered, not even looking at me as he headed for the shower. He had no idea. He had no idea that the toaster was now the most dangerous object in this house. As I walked back to my office and opened the app on my phone, a wave of nausea hit me. I felt disgusted. I was spying on my own husband. I felt like I was breaking some sacred rule of marriage. But then I remembered the dark parking lot. I remembered the scent of floral perfume. I remembered the way he looked at me and lied about the phone call. The disgust stayed, but it was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was finally ready to hear the truth, no matter how much it was going to hurt.
Monday morning arrived like any other. Mark stood by the door, adjusted his tie, and gave me a quick, dry kiss on the cheek. He sighed, telling me he had a hellish day of back-to-back meetings ahead of him. I watched from the window as his car pulled out of the driveway. I waited until the sound of the engine faded into nothing. Then I sat at my desk, my heart hammering against my ribs, and opened the app on my laptop. The first few hours were nothing, just the mundane sounds of an empty house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the thud of the mailman dropping letters through the slot. I actually started to feel embarrassed. I felt silly. I thought to myself, "Sarah, what are you doing? You've turned into a spy because you're insecure." I was moments away from closing the laptop and throwing that power strip in the trash. Maybe Chloe was right. Maybe I was just bored and looking for drama where there was none. Then, at exactly 10:45 a.m., I heard it. The distinct clack of the front door unlocking. My blood turned to ice. Mark wasn't supposed to be home for another 8 hours. I pressed my headphones tighter against my ears. I heard footsteps, Mark's heavy, confident stride. But then I heard a second set of footsteps, lighter, quicker, the sound of heels clicking on my hardwood floors. "God, I hate this house," a woman's voice said. The audio was so sharp, so clear, it felt like she was standing right behind me. It was a voice I had heard 1,000 times, a voice I'd trusted. "Just hold on a little longer, baby," Mark replied. He didn't sound tired. He didn't sound stressed. He sounded alive. He sounded like a man in love. "Once the paperwork is finalized, we can sell this dump and move to the coast. Sarah's grandmother left her more than enough to set us both up for life." I felt the air leave my lungs. The room started to spin. They weren't just having an affair. This wasn't just a physical betrayal. They were talking about my inheritance. My grandmother, the woman who raised me, had passed away 6 months ago. She left me a massive portfolio and a beautiful property upstate. And Mark, my loving husband, had been the one helping me with all the legal documents. He was supposed to be protecting me. "Is she still suspicious?" the woman asked. "She's a designer, Chloe. She's observant, but she's weak," Mark said, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "She wants to believe in us so badly that she'll ignore any lie I tell her. She's practically doing the work for us." Chloe, my best friend, my maid of honor, the woman who sat on my couch 3 days ago and told me to buy a gym membership while she held my hand. My stomach did a violent flip. I barely made it to the bathroom before I was physically sick. I stayed there on the floor for a long time, sobbing silently, my world crumbling into ash. But then the crying stopped. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. I crawled back to the computer. I forced my shaking hands to move the mouse. I turned the volume up to the maximum. "Did you get her to sign the trust documents yet?" Chloe asked. I heard the scrape of a chair on the tile. They were sitting at my kitchen table, drinking my coffee, planning my funeral while I was still alive. Almost, Mark said. I told her it's for tax protection. She's so desperate for things to go back to normal, she'll sign anything I put in front of her. You're mean, Mark, Chloe giggled. It was a high, mocking sound, a sound that will haunt my nightmares until the day I die. I'm practical, Mark replied. Why stay with a woman who's lost her spark when I can have you and her money? I sat there in the absolute silence of my office. I listened to them laugh. I listened to them plan how to leave me with nothing, no husband, no best friend, and no legacy from my grandmother. They didn't just break my heart, they were trying to erase me. I had two choices. I could run into that kitchen right now, I could scream, I could throw things, I could let them see my pain until my lungs gave out. Or I could do exactly what Mark said I was too weak to do. I could be practical, and God help them because I was about to be very, very practical. For the next 3 days, I didn't exist. Sarah, the loving wife, was gone. In her place was an actress, a woman performing the most difficult role of her life. Every afternoon, I'd stand in front of the mirror and practice my sad, desperate face. I'd fix my hair, wipe the coldness from my eyes, and wait for the sound of his car. When Mark walked through the door, I played my part to perfection. I cooked the steak he liked. I asked about his stressful meetings with a concerned tilt of my head. I even let him kiss me. But every time his lips touched my skin, it felt like a physical burn. I felt like I was being touched by a snake. Every "I love you" he whispered was a new scar on my heart. But the real work happened when he left. Every day, I'd put on my headphones and listen to the recordings. It was like watching a horror movie where I was the victim. I learned things that shattered whatever tiny fragments were left of my soul. I learned that their affair hadn't been a mistake or a lapse in judgment. They had been together for over a year. And then I heard the plan, the real plan. You need to start mentioning her mood swings to her parents, Mark, I heard Chloe say. Her voice was so casual, as if she were discussing the weather. If she's on medication for depression, we can argue in court that she isn't of sound mind. It makes the transfer of the upstate property much easier. She won't even know she's signing it away. You're a genius, Mark replied. I heard the distinct clink of glass. They were toasting. They were celebrating my mental breakdown in my own kitchen while I sat upstairs, silent and broken. They were laughing at the idea of me being drugged and discarded so they could run off with my grandmother's hard-earned legacy. But they made one fatal mistake. See, Mark was a consultant and Chloe was a paralegal. Because they worked with contracts and big words, they thought they were the smartest people in every room. They looked at me, the creative architect, the emotional artist, and thought I was too soft to understand the cold, hard world of law and finance. They forgot who raised me. My grandmother wasn't just a sweet old lady who baked cookies. She was a woman who had survived a brutal, bitter divorce in the 1970s when the laws weren't on her side. She had spent my entire childhood teaching me one thing. Sarah, never let a man hold your purse and always keep your own keys. I went to the safe in my office, the one Mark thought held only my old sketches. I pulled out the original copy of my grandmother's will. Mark had seen the summary version, but he had never seen the full 30-page document. There was a clause hidden deep in the middle, an ironclad poison pill clause that he knew nothing about. My grandmother had set it up so that if I ever filed for divorce, the entire estate,
Every penny, every acre of land would instantly move into a protected private trust. No spouse, no matter what they had signed during the marriage, could touch a single cent of it. Mark wanted the money? Fine. I was going to give him exactly what he deserved. Nothing. But just leaving wasn't enough anymore. They wanted to play games with my life. They wanted to call me weak. Fine. I was going to turn their world into a playground of consequences. I called a new lawyer. I didn't want a fair attorney. I wanted a shark. I found Elena, a woman whose name was whispered in fear by every cheating husband in the city. She specialized in high-conflict separations. I have audio of them conspiring to commit fraud and gaslight me into a medical diagnosis, I told her, my voice finally sounding like stone. Is the audio legal? Elena asked. In this state, as long as it's in my own home and I'm a resident, we can use it to prove intent to defraud in a civil suit, I replied. Elena paused on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her smiling. Sarah, this is good, but if you want to really shut them down, if you want to make sure they never bother you again, we need more than just intent. We need them to take the bait. We need them to commit the act. I looked at the power strip behind the toaster. I looked at the trust documents Mark had left on the counter for me to sign. I knew exactly what I had to do. The play was almost over, and it was time for the final act. The next evening, the stage was set. I waited until Mark had poured his second glass of wine, the warm kitchen lights casting a glow that made everything look deceptively peaceful. I sat across from him, keeping my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them shaking. I took a deep breath and put on my best, vulnerable face. Mark, I've been thinking a lot about what you said, I whispered, looking down at the table. You're right, I've been so stressed, so out of it lately. I don't want to be an obstacle anymore. I want us to move forward. I want to sign those trust documents you mentioned. If it makes our future more secure, then I'm in. I watched him closely. It was like watching a predator spot its prey. I saw the hunger flash in his eyes, a raw, ugly greed that he couldn't quite mask. His pupils dilated, and for a second his loving husband mask slipped. "Are you sure, babe?" he asked. He tried to sound cautious, but his voice was vibrating with excitement. "I don't want you to feel pressured. I just want what's best for you." "I'm sure," I said, forcing a small, tired smile. "In fact, I want to do it this weekend. Let's make it a thing. We'll have a little celebration. We should invite Chloe over, since she's been such a supportive friend to both of us, and we'll sign everything together, like a fresh start, a new beginning." "That sounds perfect," Mark said. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was the most disgusting feeling I have ever experienced. His skin felt like ice. He was holding the hand of the woman he was actively trying to destroy, and he felt absolutely nothing but the thrill of the win. That night, I didn't even have to wait long. As soon as he thought I was asleep, the mic caught them again. "She's doing it," Mark hissed into his phone. I could hear him pacing in the living room. "Chloe, we're home free. I've already contacted the realtor for the upstate house. We can have it on the market by Monday morning. It's over." "I told you she was weak," Chloe laughed, that high-pitched, grating laugh. "I almost feel bad for her, Mark. Almost." "Don't," Mark replied. "She's just an obstacle we're finally moving out of the way." An obstacle. That's all I was to them. Well, this obstacle was about to become a brick wall. On Friday afternoon, while Mark was at the office, I went into high gear. I didn't pack everything, I didn't want the house to look empty, but I moved my life out in pieces. My jewelry, my grandmother's handwritten journals, my most important architectural portfolios. I moved them all to a secure storage unit he didn't know existed. Then I sat down with the documents. Mark forgot that I'm an architect. My entire career is built on noticing the tiny details, the fine lines, and the hidden structures. With the help of my lawyer, Elena, I had a professional forge a new set of papers. To a quick glance, they looked identical to the ones Mark had prepared. Same font, same header, same signature lines. But the fine print was a masterpiece. Instead of transferring my grandmother's property into a joint trust, these documents were a formal, notarized confession. By signing them, the parties were acknowledging a voluntary surrender of all marital assets and admitting to financial coercion. It was a long shot, it was a gamble, but I knew Mark. I knew his arrogance. He was so sure I was weak that he wouldn't even read the pages before he signed them. He'd be too busy looking at the finish line. We had prepared a signing ceremony they would never forget. And the best part? I was going to make sure every single word was recorded.
Saturday arrived. The weather was beautiful outside, but inside the house, the air felt thick, like the pressure before a massive thunderstorm. My heart was a drum in my chest, but my face was a mask of perfect, calm marble. To Mark and Chloe, today was their payday. Today was the day they finally dealt with me. Chloe showed up at exactly 6 p.m. She was wearing a dress that was a little too tight and a smile that was a little too wide. She smelled like that same expensive floral perfume I had smelled on Mark's jackets. She walked right up to me and tried to wrap her arms around me in a hug. For 7 years, I would have hugged her back, but this time, I just stood there. My arms stayed at my sides. I felt like I was being touched by a ghost. "Are you okay, Sarah?" she asked, her eyes darting quickly to Mark. "You look different." "I'm great," I said, looking her right in the eye. In fact, I've never felt more clear-headed in my entire life. We sat down at the kitchen table, my table, the same spot where they had sat and laughed at my weakness while I was upstairs. Mark laid out the papers with a flourish. He even brought out a fancy fountain pen, like we were signing a peace treaty instead of a death warrant for my future. "So," Mark began, his voice sounding like warm silk, "these documents basically move the inheritance into a managed account that we both oversee. It's for our protection, Sarah, for our future, for our children, eventually." "Our children," I repeated. The words tasted like ash. I turned my head to look at Chloe. "Did you hear that, Chloe? He's thinking so far ahead. He's thinking about the future." Chloe nodded, her face twisted into a mask of false sympathy. "It's the right move, Sarah. It really is. It's about security." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake, not even a millimeter. I looked at the signature line, then I looked back at them. "Before I sign this," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "I actually have a little surprise for you both. You know how I've been so depressed and unstable lately? Well, I haven't been resting. I've been working on a new project, a little audio-visual presentation." Mark frowned. "What are you talking about, Sarah? Let's just get this done." "Oh, it'll be done," I said. I pulled my laptop from the end of the counter and slid it into the center of the table. I turned the screen toward them. "It's a recording, right from this kitchen. The acoustics in here are actually amazing. You should hear for yourselves." I hit play. Then Chloe's mocking laugh filled the air. Then Mark's voice boomed through the speakers. "She's practically doing the work for me. Why stay with a woman who's lost her spark when I can have you and her money?" The silence that followed was deafening. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Mark's face went from pale to red to a ghostly, sickly white.
Chloe looked like she wanted to melt through the floorboards. She couldn't even look at me. "Sarah," Mark started, his voice cracking like thin ice. That's not what it sounds like. We were just joking. It was a role-playing exercise for a business scenario. You're taking it out of context." "Stop," I yelled. The word hit the room like a gunshot. "The mic is in the power strip, Mark, behind the toaster. I have 3 weeks of audio. I have your plan to sell my grandmother's house. I have Chloe's idea to gaslight me into a medical diagnosis. I have everything, every single word." I stood up, towering over them. I wasn't the weak girl they talked about. I wasn't an obstacle. I was the storm. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, leaning over the table until I was inches from Mark's face. "You're both going to leave now. Mark, you have 10 minutes to throw whatever clothes you can fit in a garbage bag. Chloe, if I ever see your face again, or even if you think about calling me, I will send the full, unedited audio to your boss at the firm and your parents. I'm sure they'd love to know exactly how you spend your lunch breaks." The look of pure, raw terror on their faces was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The great love they had, it vanished in a second, because now the only thing they cared about was surviving.
Mark didn't go quietly at first. That wasn't his style. He tried to do what he always did when he felt backed into a corner. He tried to intimidate me. He stood up, knocking his chair back with a loud clatter, and tried to tower over me. He puffed out his chest, his face twisting into a mask of fake outrage. "This is my house too, Sarah," he yelled, his finger pointing inches from my face. "You can't just kick me out because of some recording. I have rights. You think you're so smart, but you can't just throw me away." I didn't blink. I didn't even lean back. I just reached into my bag and slid a fresh blue folder across the marble counter. It landed right in front of him with a heavy thud. "Actually, Mark," I said, my voice as sharp as a razor, "I can. I've spent the last 48 hours with the bank and my attorney. Since every single cent of the down payment and every mortgage payment came from my grandmother's inheritance, money that I've now proven was being managed under duress and fraud, your name on that deed is about as useful as a scrap of paper. And since I've already filed an emergency restraining order based on your conspiracy to defraud me, you have exactly 10 minutes before the police arrive to escort you off this property." I looked past him. Chloe was already gone. At the first mention of the police, her great love for Mark vanished like smoke in the wind. She didn't say goodbye, she didn't look back, she grabbed her designer purse and practically ran out the front door, leaving Mark to drown in the mess they had made together. Their partnership wasn't built on love, it was built on greed, and greed has no loyalty. Mark looked down at the legal papers. Then he looked at the laptop, playing his own voice back to him. Then, for the first time in 7 years, he actually saw me. He didn't see the weak wife he could manipulate. He saw the woman who had just dismantled his entire life in a single move. "I loved you, Mark," I said. For a second, just 1 second, my voice broke. A tear escaped and rolled down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. "I was your partner. I was your biggest fan. I would have given you the world if you had just asked. You didn't have to steal it from me." "Sarah, please," he whispered, reaching out to touch my arm. "We can fix this. We can talk about this. I was confused. "The time for talking ended the moment you brought her into my kitchen," I snapped, pulling my arm away. 10 minutes, Mark. Start packing." I watched him go. It was the most pathetic sight I've ever seen. He didn't leave with the dignity of a high-level consultant. He left with 2 mismatched suitcases and a black garbage bag full of his expensive suits. As he walked down the driveway, he looked small. He looked like the coward he had always been, hidden behind a fancy smile and my money. When the door finally clicked shut and his car pulled away for the last time, I sat down on the floor of my kitchen. It was finally quiet. But it wasn't that heavy, suffocating silence from before. It was a clean silence, a fresh start. I walked over to the toaster, reached behind it, and unplugged the power strip. I didn't need to listen anymore. The truth was out, and the air was finally clear. A month later, the divorce was finalized. It was a bloodbath for him. Because of the evidence of fraud, the judge ensured Mark didn't get a single penny of my assets. Chloe didn't fare much better. An anonymous tip, accompanied by a few choice audio clips, reached the partners at her law firm. They don't take kindly to paralegals who conspire to commit financial fraud. She was fired within the hour. I sold that house. I couldn't stay there. I could still hear their laughter in the walls, and I didn't want those memories in my head. I moved upstate, to the house my grandmother left me. I spent the whole summer painting the rooms white, letting the sunshine in and breathing in the mountain air. For the first time in a long time, the only voice I had to listen to was my own, and for once, I liked what she had to say.
It's funny how time changes your perspective. Looking back on everything now, I realize that a little hidden microphone tucked behind a toaster didn't actually end my marriage. My marriage had ended a long time ago. It died in the whispers, the lies, and the moments Mark chose her over me. The mic didn't break us, it just gave me the courage to finally see the cracks that were already there. People ask me all the time if I regret it. They ask if I feel guilty for spying on the man I shared a life with for 7 years. My answer is always the same, and I say it without a single doubt in my heart. I don't regret the mic. Not for a second. What I regret is that I spent so long living in a house where the truth had to be hidden. I regret that I let someone make me feel small for trusting my own instincts. Betrayal is a loud thing, isn't it? It screams at you in the middle of the night. It screams in the late-night phone calls he takes in the other room. It screams in the fake excuses about work meetings and the sudden freezing coldness of a partner's touch. But justice? Justice is quiet. Justice is the scratch of a pen signing divorce papers that finally set you free. It's the click of a key turning in a new lock to a home that belongs only to you. It's the deep, silent breath you take when you realize you never have to look over your shoulder again. If you're watching this right now and you feel that cold stone sitting in the pit of your stomach, if you feel like your perfect life is just a beautiful house built on a foundation of lies, please listen to me. Don't be afraid of the truth. Yes, the truth might break your heart into a million pieces today. It might shatter your world. But I promise you, it is the only thing that will ever set you free tomorrow. My name is Sarah. I'm no longer the weak wife Mark and Chloe laughed about. I'm no longer the woman who was afraid to ask questions because she was scared of the answers. I am the woman who listened, the woman who learned, and the woman who walked away with the only thing that truly matters in this life, my dignity. The kitchen in my new house is much smaller than the one I left behind. The windows aren't as big and the counters aren't fancy marble. But the air here? The air is clear. There are no secrets hiding in the corners anymore. And sometimes, in the early morning, when the sun hits the counter just right, I still make 2 cups of coffee. One is for me, to enjoy in the silence of my own peace. And the other? That's for the memory of the woman I used to be, the one who was finally brave enough to stop talking and start listening. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you deserve the truth, and you deserve peace.